Welcome back to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosbel, and joining me today, you are in for such a treat today because joining me is Sally Orange. And Sally is a former British Army major and physiotherapist turned fruit dressing adventure athlete, mental health campaigner, and charity fundraiser who believes deeply in the power of hope, honesty, and human connection. Her life's work has been shaped by service, lived experience, mental illness, and resilience. She shares her story as a reminder to others that they are never alone. In 2025, Sally was diagnosed with breast cancer. Faced with uncertainty, she chose to respond in the way she knows best, by moving forward openly and unapologetically. Shortly after her diagnosis, she ran the London Marathon dressed as a giant boob to raise awareness and start conversations, trekked to Everest base camp in the same costume, and straight after completed the Everest Marathon, the highest marathon in the world. For Sally, these challenges were not about bravado, but about hope, proving that even in the midst of treatment and fear, purpose and joy can still be found. Alongside her cancer journey, Sally is internationally recognized for using extreme endurance challenges and humor to change the narrative around mental health. She has completed over 85 marathons, including the 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. She's set multiple Guinness World Records, won Invictus Games medals, and raised almost £1 million for more than 50 charities. She is also the first and only female national ambassador for the Army Cadet Force and was awarded an MBE for services to charity and mental health. She also received an honorary doctorate for services to physiotherapy and mental health from the same university that she was rejected from 6 years in a row when applying to study physiotherapy. Sally speaks with warmth, vulnerability, and optimism, offering a message of reassurance rather than pressure. You don't have to be fearless to be hopeful. You just have to keep going one step at a time. So welcome to the show, Sally.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
Oh, this is going to be such a wonderful conversation. We were talking before the show that I am planning to run my first marathon this year. So it was a lot of fun to get a few tips and tricks on running my first marathon.
Yeah, you'll be absolutely fine. I'm really excited for you.
All right. So, Sally, where do you hail from?
So I'm from, I live in Salisbury, in the UK, which is near Stonehenge, is the easiest way to put it. But I'm actually in the Canary Islands at the moment in the sunshine, which is really nice for January.
Lovely. That I've heard a couple of people have said that you don't really go to England for the weather. So,
Well, there's a lot of rain and grey. So if you want that, but yeah, we've got to have rain as well as sunshine. So it evens itself out over the year.
yeah. If there's no rain, there's no rainbows, right?
Exactly.
Yes. All right. Well, I cannot wait to dive into this conversation because we're going to take this from a little different perspective. So normally we start talking about cancer and then move into silver linings, blessings, all of the things that have come from that. And your cancer is fairly new. You were diagnosed, less than a year ago at the recording of this. And a lot of it is kind of what happened beforehand that I really want to talk about. But let's just kind of start with let's start where I do with everybody. Start with your diagnosis. Like, what was going on in your life? How were you diagnosed with breast cancer?
So it's almost a year to the day that I was actually that I found the lump, and I'd come over to the Canary Islands at the time because I was going to be going to Argentina to climb Mount Aconcagua, the highest mountain outside of the Himalayas. So I was coming over here to train and put lots of weight on my back and go up the hills. And I had a day off, and I decided that I needed a new bikini. So I went to buy one, and it was actually when I was in the changing room. I don't normally at home get changed in front of a mirror, but I happened to be getting changed in front of a mirror, and I just saw what probably looked like a bit of a dimply skin. And I remember just sort of kind of feeling it, and it was quite high. And I remember thinking, oh, there's a bit of a lump there. Um, oh, it's probably just a rib. So I then tried on my other side and realised my rib wasn't exactly at the same level. I was like, oh, okay. Um, but because I was going to climb Mount Aconcagua, I didn't really tell anyone for 3 months, for 3 weeks, because I knew that I wanted to go anything, and what was really going to sort of happen in 3 weeks. So I went and did the mountain. Um, and then when I came home, I'd actually broke my wrist on the way back down the mountain. So I was going
Oh
to
my gosh.
the GP anyway, just to find out, what I needed to do. And I said, oh, and I've got this lump. So then I was referred, and yeah, then quite soon after I got the diagnosis. But I was a bit like, I haven't really got time for cancer. And I said,
I've never heard
um,
anybody ever say that before. You're the first.
I was like, I'm supposed to be going to do the Everest Marathon. So I was very fortunate that my consultant actually let me delay the surgery for a couple of weeks, so that I could go and climb to Everest Base Camp and then take on the Everest Marathon. So I knew that I would be okay at altitude with cancer because I'd already been to altitude with the mountain.
Okay.
So I knew that that wasn't going to be a problem. And yeah, so I then went and trekked up to Everest Base Camp and ran the marathon, and then came home and had the surgery shortly after coming home. But actually, there was the London Marathon in between there as well. So I was sort of like, no, I've got the London Marathon and the Everest Marathon to do, and I was supposed to be doing the London Marathon dressed as a lettuce. I have a little claim to fame that I'm the only person in the world that's ran a marathon on every continent dressed as a different piece of fruit. And I'm now on a bit of a quest to do every continent as a vegetable. And I've already ran in Antarctica as a pod of peas. So I thought, oh, I'll do the London Marathon as a lettuce, with a sign on me saying, let us talk about mental health.
Mhm.
Um, but when I got the diagnosis, I then thought, oh, well, I'll just swap that costume. I've got a boob costume at home. So I ran it dressed as a giant boob. So, yes, had a bit of fun with it all.
And did you do the Everest Marathon with your boob too?
So I trekked up to Everest Base Camp dressed as a boob, but I'd done the Everest Marathon the year before as a slice of lemon. And so this year I actually did, or last year I did it as a slice of lime. Um, ice in a slice because it was cold, and that was because I'd taken the mental health journey around the world, dressed as pieces of fruit. I wanted to take the mental health message to the top of the world, which is why I was doing the highest marathon in the world. Because there is, although it's quite fun as to why I dress as different pieces of fruit, there's
Oh
actually
yeah, we
quite a
were going to get
serious
into that,
reason.
but
There is a bit of a serious reason behind it, in that when people see me dressed as a piece of fruit, obviously my surname is Orange, and when they see me dressed as fruit, they generally smile and they'll say, why? Why are you dressed as an apple, orange, or banana? And I say I want to change the conversation and break the stigma associated with poor mental health. And that way, people will quite often say that perhaps they've had a problem or someone they know has had a problem. And it really subtly opens up that conversation. And if they're not happy talking about it, then we can just go back to talking about the costume. But they're nice and bright and colourful. And so that's why I was doing I'd done Everest as the lemon and then was doing it as a lime. So I had to take the boob costume to actually trek up to base camp, which, on the same thinking that, I've got something visual that people can generally sort of smile at and say, why are you dressed as a big boob? And I would say, I've been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I just had some amazing reactions, particularly from the Nepalese people. And I just remember this one woman. The two of us don't speak the same language, but she saw it and she was sort of looking under it and looking around it. And so I said, "Do you want to put it on?" And she was kind of looking at me. So I took it off and put it on, and she was just laughing and laughing. And it was just the most beautiful moment of connection. with a boob. So yeah, it was just really, really good fun. Yeah, there's a bit of a serious message behind the fun, but it's just worked really well with the campaigning and getting people to talk really.
So, can you share with us, would you be open to sharing with us kind of what, I guess, what prompted you to start running marathons dressed as fruit, kind of a little bit about your mental health journey, since you seem very open about, wanting to have conversations about it with strangers. So,
Yeah. So I served for 22 years in the Royal Army Medical Corps as a physiotherapist. And during that time, I really struggled with my mental health, with anxiety and depression, often not feeling good enough. And it was it sort of bubbled under the surface. But then because I didn't want to tell anyone, because I didn't want to be medically discharged from the army, it got worse and worse. And it did get to the point where I very nearly took my life. And I just remember being at a train station and wanting to be under the under the train rather than on the train that I was due to be getting on. And it was very severe. For 2 months, I didn't leave the house, and for 2 years, I didn't speak on the phone, and I just couldn't see any reason that the world, that there was no place for me in the world, basically. And so I sort of wanted to end it. And when I did finally tell somebody within the army, unfortunately, I did end up being medically discharged. But it's just so vivid to me, those feelings, that I just want nobody else to ever have to get to that place. And I think if you do things a lot sooner, then it doesn't necessarily snowball into what it did with me. So I think the more that we can be open and recognize that we all have struggles and problems, and if we can get help to help us with those, then makes things better. And I often talk about how you wouldn't learn to swim in a storm. So when we're well is really when we should be doing the tools and techniques and learning the things that could help us for when we find ourselves potentially in a difficult situation. We know how to use them and to make us feel better. Whereas I got to crisis point, and at that point it was so difficult to sort of my head wasn't taking much in at all. So how could I learn new things, but that was completely new at that time? So if we know what it is that we should be doing, as I say, with swimming, you learn in a safe environment with people there, that if you get things wrong, you're not just completely out in that storm. So that's something that really resonates with me, of how to help other people.
and this is something that, like, I hear with our armed forces here in America as well, that, and I don't know what needs to be done to change it, but I see that people continue to struggle because they don't want to be discharged, and they more than likely will be discharged if they voice anything like this. But it just kind of steamrolls because you're not going to get better. I mean, especially if you're an Army medic, it's not necessarily like the most mental health friendly environment that there is. And I don't know if you have any suggestions or anything as to how that conversation can change so people can get help without being stigmatized or released or discharged just because they need some help.
Yeah, I just think it's, my background as a physiotherapist, I sort of liken it to, an injured ankle. That if somebody was to come to me with an ankle that they damaged a couple of days ago, it's really easy to sort of help them along the journey of what they need to do to get better. If they come to me a couple of months after that ankle injury, they've formed bad habits, they've, don't like to walk on it, they've got pain, and it's much harder to rewind what they need to do than if they'd have come to me a few days, a few days after the injury. So it's exactly the same, that, when things are small, rather than it snowballing in somebody's mind and getting worse and worse, actually just talking about it and finding out how things how they can be helped with that, different tools and techniques, because not every tool works for the same person. But it's looking in the toolkit what works for each person, um, individually, because that's the difficulty with mental health. It's not the same, and it's not even the same for the same person on different days. You can be one thing one day, and then you're something, feel something different the next day, which is why I believe that mental health is a bit like the weather. Sometimes you can wake up feeling absolutely fine, and then by the end of the day, things have got worse. Or you could wake up and not feel great at all, but actually things can get better as the day goes on. So yeah, that's those deep grey clouds that can sort of have a bit of break of sunshine in them. There can be glimmers of hope within that. It's just making sure that you find out how to get the best out of it.
Yeah. And, I think because mental health challenges are an internal thing, they're not like, a broken ankle. And there's still, even to this day, with all of the work that's being done, there's still, in many ways, a stigma related to mental health challenges that either they're, you're weak or you're a snowflake or just get over it or whatever, that people still don't take it as seriously, even with how many people are taking their lives. It's just
Yeah,
it's very
and I think
sad.
that's it. It's something that I found very interesting, having gone through, mental health breakdown, very difficult times with that, and cancer. Both of these things are invisible unless, you're at the stage where I am at the moment, where I haven't got any hair, and it becomes a bit more obvious that there's probably chemotherapy, unless I've decided to have a mad moment and completely shave my head off, um, my hair off. But it's been really interesting how I've been treated and supported through the cancer journey that wasn't there for the mental health journey. Yet they're both invisible illnesses, which yeah, I just find fascinating that the offers of support that I've had with cancer haven't been there for mental health.
Well, and I don't want to say that cancer is kind of a buzzword, but everybody knows somebody either intimately or by association that is going through or has gone through cancer. And you have I guess the look of no hair or, wearing a bandana or a hat or something like that, that just automatically screams, hey, you have cancer. So even though it is an internal thing, it still many times, shows up externally. And there just seems to be a lot more just compassion and empathy for cancer because like I said, everybody knows somebody versus mental health challenges, which, I'm a huge proponent of mental health awareness. I used to own a business that we donated, a portion of our profits every month to mental health organizations. So this is really, a spot close to my heart as well as cancer. So I love any opportunity that I have to talk about it and just raise more awareness for the getting rid of the stigma and that it's okay to seek help and take care of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. That's sort of where it was born from for me, and where the passion has come from is just not wanting anybody else to find themselves in that situation.
Absolutely. And so did you start running for your mental health or were you doing it before this kind of crisis?
No, I had done it before, but it was actually the Invictus Games that sort of really sort of made me realize the power of the power of sport. I've never been particularly fast, no, not I'll never be the fastest or fittest, but for me it's not about being the fastest or fittest. And like we were speaking before, people will quite often say, what's your time, or what time are you aiming for with the marathon? And my answer is just always the time of my life. Because I believe that that's something that I am in control of. Whereas if I set myself a goal of, 4 hours and I don't achieve that, then I feel a failure because I've set a goal that I haven't achieved. Whereas actually, if my goal is to smile all the way through the marathon, even if it might be a grimace at times, it could be the weather, or somebody could run in front of me, trip me up. Things could happen that are out of my control. But actually, if I decide that I'm going to listen to other people's stories um, when I'm running, or if I see somebody in trouble that needs a bit of help or a bit of encouragement, uh, if you've got that time frame in your mind, you don't want to do that. Whereas actually, just that care and compassion of other people and hearing their stories, because everybody who takes on a marathon has got a reason and a story behind them. It may be that they want to be faster than the last time, but it may be that they're doing it for a loved one, or for, a challenge, or something that they never thought they were possibly able to do. And I just like finding out, those reasons. So, yeah, that's at the end of a marathon, everybody gets the same medal, whether you've come first or last. So, yeah, that's that's and I just think that that movement, it's the getting outside, and particularly if you're outside in nature. I went for a run yesterday. I'm very fortunate to be by the coast at the moment, so just seeing the water. Or even if you're doing it with other people, the conversations that you can have with other people when you're not looking at each other face to face. I find the same with cycling. Um, if you're in a car journey, the conversations that you have are quite often much more open, because you're not having to look at somebody else's face. And that does mean I have to slow down a lot to be able to have a conversation. But it's that connection with other people, that you can get as well from going out for quite often I call it a joggette, just a little movement basically.
I love that you say that, because when I went through my treatments, I had lots of people asking, what can I do for you? What can I bring you? Can I make you a meal? Whatever. My request was always, come for a walk with me.
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't running at the time. But I love to walk. I live in Colorado, so the mountains and nature are just incredibly beautiful here. And I just wanted people to, I wanted the companionship. I wanted the company. I wanted somebody with me. And the conversations that I had with people when we were walking versus if we were sitting down having coffee, it was just, and you described it pretty well, because it's kind of hard to describe, but it's just a different level of connection for some reason when you don't have to look at each other, that
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
have. And it's just so powerful. Plus you're getting out in nature, you are getting movement. Like it's the best of all worlds versus drinking a bunch of sugar-filled caffeine.
Yeah, and I just think the pauses are natural when you're walking, or you're able to look around and sort of say, "Oh, look at that." It might be a bird or a certain tree or something. Whereas, as you say, when you're sitting down having a coffee with someone, it's that, oh, we must, every minute must be filled with conversation. Whereas, yeah, you can hear the birds, or you've got other things going on with a walk. I truly believe that movement is medicine, and I think my background as a physiotherapist has sort of cemented that, because that's what I've done with people, sort of all of my career. And I even sort of brought that into my cancer journey, that when I was going for my chemo, that I would run to the hospital, and when my PICC line was being flushed weekly, I'd just have that as that was a constant. That was every Wednesday. So okay, well, I'll just put my trainers on and I'll run there. And on the days that I couldn't run, I would just walk there. And even when I was getting ready to go for surgery, they were sort of like, hop on the bed, and I said, I can walk. So I said, can I actually walk to the operating theatre, because there's nothing wrong with my legs. Yes, I might need to be wheeled when I come back, and they were sort of like, the amount of times I said, they'll say, right, just hop into the chair and we'll wheel you there. You've not done anything yet, and my legs still work. And it's just this automatic people think, well, yeah, I must have to just get into the chair and be wheeled there. I said, look, I'll save your porters a job because I can, yeah, I can get myself there. Okay.
And they
So,
let you?
yes, yeah. But I mean,
Wow. A lot of times for
yeah.
liability, they won't even let you do that. They have their protocols and you don't get to change those.
Yeah, well, I'd had to walk into the hospital in the first place, and I'd managed to do that okay. So,
That's
just
true.
walking down to the operating theatre's no different to walking into the hospital in the first place. I hadn't had any sedatives or any, medication or anything at that point. That was going to happen in the anaesthetic room. So yeah, it's just this inbuilt thinking that, well, yes, you've been told in hospital to get in a chair. We'll wheel you there. Why?
And now, so how long of a distance was it for you to run to a hospital for your chemo treatments?
So it's 2.5 miles there, and then 2.5 miles back. So it was yeah, it was a nice distance, nice 5 miles with a rest in between. But I even in 2.5 miles, I sweat a lot, and I'd get to the chemo suite, and I'd be sitting in the waiting room, dripping in sweat in running kit. I'd take a change of clothes, and I remember this elderly gentleman asking me. He said, "Have you just cycled here?" I said, no, no, I've just ran. What? You ran to chemo? I said, yeah, yeah. He said, wow. He said, I've driven, but next time I'm going to park a few more rows away so I get a bit further walk. And I said, well, great. That's exactly why, I want to do it because I wanted to just, I wanted to do it for me, just as, as a routine thing to do, but also for people to realize if I can get out and do that running for chemo, then actually, if there's no diagnosis and no other reason for other people, then that might be a motivator for them. So I saw it as one of my silver linings, really, the fact that I could still do that, and I chose to do that. Um, yeah, because not everybody can do that, and
Right.
so yeah, I made it one of my silver linings, basically.
Well, and to be an example, it's one thing to tell people that this is something that you should do versus actually, walking the walk or running the run and showing
Yes.
people that, hey, if I can do it, you can park a couple of rows away and make that extra distance walk. So
And
that's
that,
just absolutely fantastic.
that was a great example because it's not saying to somebody, right, you've got to go and run a marathon, because that is just not something that people want to do, have the time to do, ever think that they could ever do. But actually, just parking a few rows away is just, yeah, something that an elderly gentleman, he could do. So yeah, my oncologist, when I'd go into the appointments, dripping in sweat, and he was like, "Have you just ran here?" Yeah, yeah. So I don't think it was the norm. And I think with my breast surgeon, when I said, um, oh, I want to go and run the Everest Marathon, that's not really the norm that people put off their surgery to be able to go and do that.
Right.
So I then was actually given, because I was delaying it for a few weeks. I was given tamoxifen. I don't know if you have tamoxifen over
Mhm.
in the States.
We do.
So I had that for a couple of weeks prior to the surgery. So there I was having my hot sweats at Everest Base Camp. Everybody else is freezing cold, and I'm there sort of, oh, hot sweats, which is fine when you're having the hot sweat, but then when it goes cold again, it's like, oh dear, this is extra cold. So yeah, so it gave a few other challenges as well.
Well, and this, just funny, I think about someone going through chemo and being on tamoxifen and running and like just kind of seeing steam come up from, the top of your head because you're so hot.
Just throw in a couple of mountains as well.
Yeah. That is so awesome. Now I saw on social media you're kind of doing this little series called Silver Linings. Can you talk about that a little bit? What that's all about?
I just feel that so many good things have come from cancer, that I never expected, never thought could. I've just had some unbelievably um, yeah, strange or positive things that have happened in the midst of things that haven't been so great. And I just think it's really important to focus on those good things. That yes, I may have lost what I call the casualties of cancer. That perhaps some people who I thought they might have been there, they haven't. But people who have been quite literally strangers prior to the diagnosis, I didn't know at all, have just been incredibly, overwhelmingly supportive in just sometimes little ways, in some of them really quite, huge ways. But and also all the charities that I wasn't aware of. I've been aware of quite a lot of mental health charities. Unfortunately, not long before my own diagnosis, my dad was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and he was given 9 months, and he's doing really well, and that was uh, 15 months ago.
Okay.
So I'm sort of
They
going
say they
through a
should never tell you how long you have. They just take that out of the conversation completely. Like, don't ever tell me how much longer I have left, because that's just some arbitrary number based on averages that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, I think some people are different, aren't they? They sort of, want to know how much do I put into, this time that I've got left on Earth, and do I do absolutely everything, or do I need to spread it, over a little bit, a bit longer?
Right.
But
I was gonna say that's a good like other way of looking at it. I don't normally look at it that way, but yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
I just think, if you've got a certain amount of money, or if you've only got a certain amount of time, let's blow all the money and go and do everything. And that's fine. But then if you end up living longer, oh, well, what happened? How do we, how do we
Right.
manage the rest of the time that we weren't supposed to be here? But I sort of supported him by going to all of his chemo sessions with him. So I've almost seen my cancer journey a little bit like a triathlon. So my training was actually going to the chemo sessions with my dad, and then the surgery with my own diagnosis. The surgery was like the swim, so it's slightly shorter than the bike or the run. The chemo has been the bike, which is sort of longer, over a longer time, and then the radiotherapy is going to be like the run, which I remember on a couple of Ironmans saying, "Oh, I've only got a marathon to go," and that's a bit like radiotherapy of going, "Well, I've only got radiotherapy to go." On its own, it's still a big thing, but actually, when you've already been through the surgery, when you've already been through chemotherapy, and then the extra drugs that I'll be taking for the next sort of 3, 7, 9 years, that's just the ongoing training for just keeping yourself fit. So it's things like that, the different silver linings of, as I say, people I've met, organizations. I even won, somebody had seen me on TV, and they got in contact through social media, and they said, "Oh, have you heard of an organization called She Ultra?" And I said, "No." And it's a female, it's an organization for females to go and do ultra runs, and it raises money for cancer charities, and there's no cut-offs, so there's no, it's not the competitive element of males and females of, and yeah, they said, "Oh, we're having, we've got an event in Portugal. We'd love you to be an ambassador for us, and would you come over to Portugal?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be amazing." And I said, "Actually, if I'm coming over there," I said, "could I do the ultra?" And they were like, "Yeah, but I thought you said you're in the middle of chemo." I said, "Yeah, I am." So I went and did an ultra marathon after my third lot of chemo, and I did it dressed as a giant boob as well. So so yeah, I suppose when I went back to the oncologist that time, I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "How's things since last time?" "Well, I've done a half marathon and I've done an ultra marathon." And he was like, "What?" So And yeah, just that would never have happened, had I not talked about the cancer. So yeah, again, a real silver lining that I got to be an ambassador for this organisation that supports other females and charities. And we actually, in Portugal, we were raising money for breast mannequins, so that the doctors over there could teach patients, or other medical professionals, what to look for, and then whether that be the visual signs, or the tactile, the feeling sign, what so yeah, so good all around, really.
Wow. I forgot to ask you, but I was going to ask you before we started if you had ever run an ultra marathon. And so,
Yeah, I
yeah,
did
how long
something.
was that one?
So that was 50K, but I did do something called the Marathon des Sables, which is 7 marathons across the Sahara Desert. Sorry, six marathons across the Sahara Desert in 7 days, and it's carrying all your own kit. And on the fourth day, it's a double marathon, just to add a bit in. I've also ran 100K across a frozen lake in Mongolia. And I've also done 100K in the Gobi Desert in the summer as well, dressed as a slice of orange.
Now, do you prefer running in the cold or the desert?
My problem is for both of them is that I sweat. I sweat a lot. And in the cold, what that means is it freezes. Whereas in the hot, although it's hot, and they were a bit concerned on the ultra marathon, because obviously my temperature regulation, with not having the hair or any hairs on on your body, it was, I was sweating a lot, and they were like, we need to just check with you. I'm like, I sweat like this, on a normal day. But in the Sahara, it was actually quite a dry heat. So even though you did sweat, you would, it's, yeah,
You
it sort of
evaporate
didn't
quickly.
leave. Yeah, yeah. So I think you just prepare for whatever situation you're in. If you're in the Arctic, Antarctic, then you're gonna wear clothes that suit that environment. But if you're in the deserts, then you'll wear clothes that'll suit that. So they're both difficult when you're running that far. I'm not gonna lie.
My husband likes to say, because he loves to hike, he says there's no bad weather, there's just bad clothing choices.
Exactly. Exactly. Poor choice of clothing.
Yes. I am not a fan of the cold, so I am a bit of a fair weather runner. So I don't really agree with him, but
I must admit, I'd like to say I'm a fair weather runner, which is why I've come out to the Canary Islands, because it's much nice. Yeah, I prefer running in the heat. But if it's an event, then yeah, I just kind of get my head down and do whatever it is that I need to do.
well, I will say you have definitely inspired me and given me a lot of motivation for doing my marathon now. And I will let everybody know, because before we started recording, we were chatting and I asked you for some tips about running a marathon. And everything that you told me was all about the mental piece of it and preparing and doing it from a mental standpoint, not any tips about training or anything else. It was all getting your head straight. And I absolutely love
Because
that. It's much more
I said to you
motivating
as
than,
well.
oh, do this amount of miles, each time kind of thing.
Yeah, no, training is cheating is my motto. And I think, like, the cancer journey as well. I think that's, a lot of that is mental as well. If you can really sort of have a positive mindset, then that can help you. There are hurdles, to have to overcome, and there are setbacks, but it's how you get back up from them setbacks that helps you move forward. And I think that's the really important thing. The goals that you have with cancer, you just have to be prepared that those goalposts might move, on quite a few different occasions. I know when I was first diagnosed, it was a case of, yep, you'll have surgery and then you'll have 5 lots of radiotherapy. sorry, on diagnosis, but then on surgery, it was a case of we found that it spread. So actually, you're going to have chemo now, as well as a lot more radiotherapy than we first thought. So it's just being, just being open to that, and I think as well, sort of in, certainly in the UK, I just feel very, very grateful for the medical system that we have. Certainly being out in somewhere like Nepal, if you get cancer over there, you don't have the same standard of care that we have over here. And I just think, yeah, that in itself is a silver lining. Yes, you can, be woe is me, I've got cancer, but hey, if I'm going to get it, I would much prefer to be in the UK than I would in Nepal. And I just think there is so much to be grateful for. So, and also, it's advanced, to be able to get it now rather than say 40 years ago. That in itself, the
Mhm.
advancements have, come on no end. And so many of us probably wouldn't still be here if it was 40 years ago, and because there wouldn't be the screening, or there wouldn't be the all the research that's gone into things. So yeah, I just think we're very lucky.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And gratitude every day is so important for everything because we do have so much to be grateful for. Right.
Yeah,
So Sally,
definitely.
where can people find you if people want to find out more about you, if they want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to reach you?
So I have a website which is sallyorange.com, and before people wonder, that is my real name. Just because of all the fruit dressing, it's my name that came first. And then on Instagram, Sally Orange MBE, or on LinkedIn, Sally Orange MBE, Facebook, Sally Orange. So yeah, that's how I can be found. So please, please do get in contact.
Okay. And we'll put all of
And
those in the show notes so you don't have to write them down real quick.
yeah.
All right. And Sally, I asked this of all of my guests the last question. If you were to come across someone who is just diagnosed with cancer or just in the midst of overwhelm of a new diagnosis, what is one piece of advice that you would give to them to help them get through these initial stages?
I mean, I've said it to a few people. It is, you'd be surprised about the positives that come out of this situation. I know that it can see, and I know that can seem flippant to somebody who's in that darkest, deepest, darkest moment. But if you keep your eyes open, there is so much opportunity. With challenge comes opportunity. And yes, this is going to be a challenge, but the opportunities are endless out there. So just go out and grab those opportunities with both hands if you can.
Perfect. I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. This was such a wonderful conversation, and I'm pumped to go out and keep training for my marathon. And I wish you great success with your radiotherapy and the rest of your holiday in the Canary Islands. I'm a little jealous. I miss the water every day living here in Colorado. So
Oh, I can't wait to find out how you get on. And yeah, I get so excited for people doing their first marathon. I know that feeling of elation when you cross the line and think, wow, how have I managed to do that? Because for me, for so many years, I think age 8, when I first saw the London Marathon, I thought, wow, that looks amazing. I want to do that one day. But it took me until I was 34 until I plucked up the courage to go and do it. So yeah, I love it when people are doing it. And it may be your first and only one, but you know it may go on to other things. But when you get that medal, whether you come first or last, it's the same medal.
oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I will definitely let you know how it goes.
Please do.
All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's been lovely to chat to you.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.